You've ever heard of the Ring of Fire? And I'm not talking about the Johnny Cash song. There's probably people go, "Who's Johnny Cash? What are you talking about? Ring of Fire?" Well, the Ring of Fire is also known as the ring that goes from the northern plate of Antarctica all the way around the Pacific plate, around to the Indian Australian plate. It basically encompasses the Pacific Ocean there. And around that plate, there is a lot of friction because the plates are moving closer together. Well, I'll be dead before that happens, but maybe we'll be able to drive to Australia or something. Who knows?
I'd rather drive to Hawaii, but not
Yeah,
if the ocean's gone.
yeah. Well, most of the ocean will probably be gone by that point, and the Atlantic Ocean will be much, much larger at that point. And our plates are basically colliding slowly together. People look at the ground and they say, "Hey, this is pretty solid." Actually, we're not. We're actually floating on a sea of lava and substrate stuff. That's the best way I could put it. In Mexico, because of the fact is they are on that ring of fire in a big way, they experienced two earthquakes back to back. One was a 7.1 and another one was an 8.1. What's interesting about that is one of these earthquakes actually triggered a volcano. With volcanoes, they like to be kind of left alone for the most part. I mean, because they're seeping, bubbling cauldrons of lava that are close to the surface. And when they get ready to pop, sometimes they will trigger an earthquake. And in other cases, because the earthquake is happening, it will actually trigger them. So in this instance, the earthquake that happened in Mexico actually triggered a volcanic eruption over in
Popocatépetl.
yeah,
Sorry,
I was that's
yeah.
all right. I was practicing actually, and I switched off the page for a second. I forgot where it was. A
Yeah.
Popocatépetl.
It's actually an Aztec name and not a Spanish name. And so
Okay.
I have trouble with these words a lot.
Okay.
So
Well, it's located in southeast Mexico City. The volcanic eruption caused a church to collapse during a mass at the foot of the mountain, killing at least 15 worshipers. I guess they weren't praying hard enough to their volcanic god. I'm just saying. But a lot of people were killed by this volcanic eruption as well. Over 217 people, roughly,
yes. Yeah.
and the earthquakes too. So volcanoes have always been a fascination for me ever since I was a kid. And the fact is that while we know a lot about them, we still have not scratched the surface because we don't know when they're going to erupt always. We can get clues, but sometimes those clues don't always pan out. And sometimes they just pop when we least expect it. Kind of your thoughts.
Well, geological studies, they're not an exact science, again, because there's a lot of factors. I think that I don't know how they can evaluate them. What was interesting about all of this that happened to me was Mexico City sits atop an ancient shallow lake, and the soil and sediments of that washed in from surrounding mountains thousands of years ago in the early 1300s. Attracted by those fertile soils, the Aztecs selected an island in the lake in which to build their capital, Tenochtitlan, which eventually became Mexico City. And the Spaniards who came in drained the surrounding waters to prevent the flooding that happened frequently. But the problem is that the land that Mexico City is built on basically is an ancient lake bed, and it's sand. And so what happens with that land is that if air blows through it, liquefaction happens, and it basically sand becomes like water.
Yes.
And in 1985, 10,000 people were killed in Mexico City by a quake that happened like 100 miles south of Mexico City. But the effects were the vibrations caused liquefaction, and the city just toppled. All these big buildings toppled because it's one of the most populated cities in North America area. I mean, and we don't know for sure if that's what happened here this last week, but they suspect it was another case of liquefaction, and it becomes like jello. And I saw this video where it's really freaky to see what happens when air blows through this loose soil. So
Oh yeah, I've
yeah.
seen a lot of videos like that where they talk about the liquefaction. It'll happen when the soil becomes so oversaturated with water that it just can't hold it anymore, and then it just becomes, that's where you get like a lot of landslides and whatnot. So I mean, but in this instance, it's not just it is air that's getting under there because it's not an area that has a lot of rain, but I mean they do get a lot of motion in there. So
Right. Right. So, yeah, it's very unfortunate. There's been a heck of a lot of crap that's hit the fan this last month.
Mhm.
So
You know what was interesting about this article is the fact is I know aftershocks can take place, sometimes usually within the first few minutes or sometimes days. The article here says it can happen up to months later. So those wouldn't necessarily be the primary earthquakes when we have like one a few months later. That could be actually a result of an aftershock. Now, because this earthquake was so large, I almost hate the fact that we have a 24-hour news cycle now because religious people see this kind of stuff happening. They go, oh my God, it's the end of the world. It's the end of the world. It's like, no, we have earthquakes all the time, literally all the time, because the earth, it's a living planet, basically. Like I said before, the planet is on a sea of lava and whatnot. So we are floating around up here. So the fact is that we have earthquakes all the time is nothing new. This happens all the time. And California, since it's right above Mexico there, and they are on that ring of fire, people were thinking that, hey, maybe we're going to get that big quake that we've been expecting for some time. And there was a tweet that came out from a person who's a seismologist here. And she basically had said that, no, this is not going to happen. She says M3 quakes happen somewhere in the world every few minutes. 6 in Southern California last week. No connection to Mexico. The earth doesn't care you felt it. The earth doesn't care if you feel it or not. It happens all the time. So the fact is that, no, the world's not coming to an end because we had a really big earthquake. It just doesn't mean that. Atheist Ranger, your thoughts?
Well, given my personal experience of having survived a tiny earthquake in Delaware, believe it or not, a few years back, all I can say is earthquakes is probably one of the natural disasters that's very, very unpredictable. Whereas, I mean, at least with hurricanes, we can see them coming. With earthquakes, you never know when they're coming, and it's probably one of the most helpless things you can go through.
You know what's really, yeah, it is very unsettling. I've never been in an earthquake. That's why they make earthquake rides. I'm assuming because that people think it's fun. The thing is, earthquakes don't kill anybody. They've never killed anybody. It's the buildings that we inhabit that are not ready for those earthquakes because we don't know how to make a good structure that can overall handle that kind of shaking, and stuff falls on us. That's what causes it. It's not the earthquake itself. It's the result of the buildings that we inhabit that fall down on top of us because we don't know how to build stuff on top of a land that can shake and rattle around.
Yeah, the unsettling part was when it hit, I was at work, but I was at the top floor of the hotel.
Oh, yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Oh, geez.
That's some helpless BS. That's some helpless crap right there.
Yeah, exactly. If you're on top of a building that's way up there, the building starts swaying around. What are you going to do? There's nothing you can do. You're stuck inside the building. Matt, your thoughts?
It's pretty scary when you get into one of these earthquakes. I've never been in an earthquake, but I wouldn't want to. But seeing all the footage from all the things that are going on in Mexico right now. And, when you had said, earthquakes don't kill anybody, the buildings do. And you're right, because, I mean, a lot of these places, especially in Mexico, the buildings, I don't think, are built properly. I mean, because just looking at the footage, you just as the earthquake was happening, you see the one building that just basically fell to the ground. When earthquakes hit California, you really don't see that.
Yeah.
They may shift or they might have some structural damage, but they haven't collapsed.
Right. If you remember back in I think it was like 1980, 1981, there was the World Series was just about getting ready to take place.
Oh, that was 89.
Was that 89? I was in the
89 in San Francisco.
Yeah.
Okay, it was San Francisco. I remember it was in the 80s. I didn't remember which part of the 80s.
That was 89, and the game was just starting, and the earthquake hit.
Yeah, that part of it I remember. I didn't remember the date. But the fact is that the earthquake in there was so large. We thought it's like, oh, yeah, we get earthquakes all the time out here. We can deal with an earthquake. Apparently, we were wrong because if you see the footage from that time period, there were like these multiple decked roads that literally ran right on top of each other, and they just came down flat as a pancake on top of each other. That was
the bridge. The San Francisco Bridge, Bay Bridge.
Well, that was not just
bridge.
It was not just the bridge. It was not just the bridge.
Well, they were elevated roadways. They were, but they were, and that's part of the reason here in the Pacific Northwest, everybody's been looking at this one road, and that's why we were digging this huge tunnel. They're saying, yeah, this thing, we don't want to have what happened down in '89 to happen here because it's a major thoroughfare into, I think it's off of 99, but it's a major thoroughfare into downtown Seattle. And there was something that was said about this quake down in Mexico. The advantage is we find out more and more about how should we be building our buildings, and I would just have to say, first of all, this is a really good case for better L&I and better construction standards. But we've found because of the '89 quake in San Francisco and the other quakes, it's like the more shock absorption we can build into buildings, the better they are, rather than being really stiff.
Right. They have to counterweight everything. More
Yeah,
or less.
yeah, they have to.
Yes.
What they've been doing is sometimes I've seen videos on this where they will do is they will put like a counterweight in the top of the building. So when the earth starts swaying one way, it stays with it, and so it keeps it from moving too fast one way or the other, and it'll stay with the shaking of the earth, and it's supposed to work. Or they will put special plates where it float, as it were, quote unquote. So they're building the buildings not quite into the ground, but I mean they're like on these big rubberized things, so they won't shift around. It's really interesting when you come to that kind of engineering.
Well, it's like, people who live in areas where tornadoes run rampant. They have these a lot of the new construction now are built with special rooms in the house. Like even if you're in even if the house has a basement, you go to this special room and it's like a safety room.
Yes, yeah. Oklahoma.
I don't know what it's made out of.
Yeah,
Oklahoma, Arkansas, and all those places.
Tornado
what they do.
Alley.
Yeah, in Tornado Alley, they know that certain materials with tornadoes, we can kind of predict tornadoes to a point. I mean, we're starting to get more of a clue on those. But because we know the wind speeds of the tornado and it's not the wind speed that kills you, it's the debris that the winds pick up,
right?
And then that starts shooting at you. That's what those safe buildings are made from. Is there's a whole company that's built around. I wish I could remember the name of it off the top of my head. I haven't researched it in some time, but they built these safe houses so they can withstand the impact of 2x4s and things like that being thrown at it. I mean, they literally with air guns just shoot 2x4s right towards these buildings and see if they can get them to crack, break, or whatever. And that's where most of your deaths happen, is because of just the debris.
Scary.
It is. Our planet is amazing.
Yeah.
Also trying to kill us at the same time.
Mother Nature.
Yep, Mother Nature.